President Trump says that he can work to end the war in Ukraine even without President Volodymyr Zelensky being a part of the negotiations. In recent days, he's characterized his leadership as poor. Meanwhile, members of Congress and European leaders have backed Zelensky as the war goes on. And Paul Post is an associate professor at the University of Chicago and a non-resident fellow at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, joining us to talk about the ongoing efforts to end the war. Paul, you wrote about this just today, so we're really grateful to have you in here. So many mischaracterizations coming from the White House. President Trump saying that Ukraine is the one that started the war, although he seems to be backing off that a little bit, but also that Zelensky is the dictator. Trump would not say that that Putin is the dictator. What is the point of framing this all in this way?
Well, I think one thing that's really important to keep in mind right now is that there is a lot of what you could call front stage posturing going on. And that is all of these public statements that are being made by Trump, public statements being made by Zelensky, even non-statements by Putin. And they're all out in the public, and they're all intended to kind of set terms, maybe even show that there's resolve with respect to these negotiations. But the key term is that they're front stage. There's a lot happening on behind the scenes, and indeed, some of this front stage rhetoric, actually in the case of Trump, might be due to frustration over what's happening behind the scenes.
But meantime, you have Ukraine's soldiers still on the front line, feeling demoralized by this rhetoric. What does it ultimately do to their efforts?
So I think it is something that is concerning, but for me, one of the things that is important to keep in mind whenever looking at Trump and the way that he carries out diplomacy is, and we saw this when he was president before, is he likes to execute a good cop, bad cop routine, where he is typically the bad cop. And we are absolutely seeing that now, where he is using this harsh rhetoric towards Zelensky. However, there's also the good cop in this case being his envoy in Ukraine, who Zelensky has been praising. And then there's also been people in between. This would be J.D. Vance, this would be Marco Rubio, who have been supporting Trump's position, but have been doing so in a much more measured way, in a way that you could say is more constructive. So all of that is a way of kind of saying that you can't just look at what Trump's saying to really get a sense of what the administration as a whole is trying to achieve.
Okay, well, I want to get your sense then of what he is doing, because Zelensky is not a part of any of these negotiations. Does he really not hold any card, as Trump insultingly said in the public?
I think what's important is obviously Ukraine was not part of the negotiations that were happening in Saudi Arabia. However, Ukraine is indeed part of ongoing negotiations. Marco Rubio talked about that today, about the meeting that they had to talk about, say, an agreement to be able to have Ukraine provide mineral resources to the United States in exchange for security guarantees. So there are negotiations happening. However, in the case of that agreement for the mineral rights, Zelensky had actually turned down the initial proposal, and that is apparently what drew the ire of President Trump. And so again, it's about that behind the scenes negotiating where the real work is being done that then gets translated into the public stage, and that's what we're seeing.
You mentioned those rare mineral rights. Let me ask you, how much of the U.S.'s ability to claim some of that is driving some of what we're seeing? Is it, in your eyes?
I think it's a key part. Now, one thing, of course, to keep in mind is that Zelensky himself actually brought this forward back in the fall as a possible component of an agreement between Ukraine and the United States for a security guarantee. Now, from Zelensky's perspective, he would ultimately like to see Ukraine be part of NATO. That doesn't seem to be on the table. And even though Zelensky is going to continue to push for that, it doesn't seem likely. However, he wants something at least short of that. This is where we now start talking about the possibility of, say, European peacekeepers being in Ukraine, that maybe they won't be NATO forces, Ukraine wouldn't be under NATO Article 5, but it would be a form of security guarantee. But from the perspective of what would the United States gain in return, these mineral deposits are part of that calculation.
Paul Post, an associate professor at the University of Chicago. We're going to have to end it there. We really appreciate your time tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you.